Next tonight, only weeks into 2019, and gang violence has already been making headlines, particularly after the murder of Jayden Moody, who was stabbed to death in London. He was just 14 years old. His family say that he was not involved in any gang, but his death and other attacks has raised the question over what are the key causes of violent crime and what needs to be done to tackle the problem in the UK. Well, the problem with gangs, according to one journalist, is down to a lack of black father figures in young black boys' lives. And some support that view. One of them is Dr Tony Sewell. Now, he has worked in the justice system and supports some young people from deprived backgrounds. He joins me now, along with Marvyn Harrison, who has been trying to change the missing black father narrative with the podcast Dope Black Dads. Good evening to you both.
Good evening.
And Dr Tony, I'm going to start with you because you were quoted in this article. And in fact, the journalist who wrote it said it's after talking to you he came to the conclusion that actually it is because of absent black dads, which is why we're seeing the issues we are seeing with young black men turning to gang life and gang crime.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence for me saying this hasn't just come from nowhere. I mean, in my kind of role in the Youth Justice Board, I don't know why people haven't done this before. Just talk to some of those young men involved in those issues. And I mean, I was very honest with them when I went round there. Obviously, it wasn't exhaustive research, but it was enough to tell me that this was a case. That the father not being there, or the crisis when the father hasn't been there at all, and trying to find that father became a kind of burden on them, and actually, in a sense, really was the key issue that's been unresolved. Mm. The other thing is, just talking about this now, I can't remember a TV programme or anything that's really discussed this. We have ducked this issue, and we've ducked this issue because of a couple of things. We politically don't want to go there. And one of the reasons why we don't want to go there is the sort of the sacredness of the single mother. And it's almost a sense that what we're doing is we're trying to beat up the single mum if we ever reach there. And I actually think that what those boys are saying is that, look, if I don't have at home somebody to police me, somebody to restrain that strong arm, and the mums are not doing that enough, then we have an issue.
OK, Marvyn, what did you think? Your dad, your son, what did you think reading that article and blaming black men, black dads, for playing a role in the gang crime we're seeing in the UK?
I think it's hugely simplified and it's quite a narrow perspective in terms of the reasoning why. I think there's a myriad of reasons why these things happen. I think I read your article in The Spectator, and I think ultimately you removed some of the elements that they would have given alternatively, and then you've come up with this solution. So for me, it's not necessarily incorrect, but it's definitely not the only factor. I think it's important you look at the wider factors. I think within our group, we have sort of 98 dads. We're based in London, actually, the UK. They talk about wider things that affected them as individuals, being as well as their parenting outlook. And so I think we need to be a bit more wiser and kinder in terms of the language that we use and the headlines that we create around this subject, because it's not helpful to the wider discussion. We're already, people believe that black men aren't particularly of value, and they have loads of negative stigmas and connotations around black men. We don't need to add a new one, especially if it's simplifying an actual true experience. So I think you need to speak to dads who are people who are current dads, also speaking to children who haven't had their parents around as to what affected. I came from a single parent home. My mother raised me. I didn't fall foul of any of those things, but at the same time, I know others that did who had two parents at home. So it's a huge simplification. I
mean, Dr Tony, the issue I think that Marvyn's bringing up, and the reason why people can take issue with the comments you're making, the focus on absent black dads, is that it just throws a very negative rhetoric and continues a negative conversation on black men who could potentially argue that actually, you know what, in society, in life, they have things quite tough, and there are positive things that they are doing to support families, that they're not all absent.
Yeah, but what you've got to look at is, I've agreed, I'm up for the positive thing in this. I run a charity called Generating Genius. We work with young boys to help them through that, and that's part of what we do in the charity. But I would say that for me, I think that unless we actually try and confront this, you can't avoid this as the issue. You know what I mean? I mean, you can say that there are other things going on, and I don't doubt that there are
simplification.
I mean, the simplification argument is a problem with that as well, because what we do is we say we stack back up all these other things, but the one that is there that we're not going to and actually having the conversations about is the one that is the nerve. So I agree there are other issues. In the opinion of young people, and actually, you know, in the opinion of women as well, because I think that's the key issue here, that in fact what you have is examples of super women who go out and say, I can raise all these boys, I can do everything. But what about the larger percentage of women? I take calls nearly kind of every week with mothers struggling with their teenage boys. I mean, it's a reality. So unless it's actually to help those women.
Marvyn, very quickly, if you can just respond.
I don't get what the point is. I think ultimately what the doctor is saying that he believes that his charity is the solution.
No, I didn't say that.
What I'm saying is that I'm speaking to dads now on the ground in large swathes, and what we're saying is it can be a factor, but it's not the factor, and that we're actually in a much better place.
Marvyn Harrison, Dr Tony Sewell, really good discussion.